Hello friends, welcome back. So today we are going to discuss about object oriented programming or OOPS concept. So what is OOP? Basically OOPS stand for object oriented programming. So historically procedure programming is about writing procedures or methods that performs operations on the data. But with the object oriented programming, it is about creating objects that contain both data and methods. The main aim of the OOP is nothing but to bind together the data and the functions that operate on them so that no other part of the code can access this data except that function. So basically we're binding functions together. Okay, then there are several advantages of object oriented programming over procedural programming. OOP is faster and easier to execute. Then OOP provides a clear structure for the program. Then OOP helps to avoid duplication of code. That because the common code would be kept at a single place and we can easily reuse it instead of repeating it. This ultimately makes the code easier to maintain, modify and debug. Okay. OOPS also makes it possible to create full reusable applications with less code and shorter development time. So these are some of the advantages of OOPS over procedural programming. And as part of this tutorial, we are going to discuss about object, class, then the four major pillars of the OOPS. That is nothing but abstraction, encapsulation, then inheritance and polymorphism. So let's start with object. Basically, what is object basically? Object is nothing but anything that has state and behavior is known as an object. So if you consider real-time examples like pencil, which has state and behavior, or apple or book, or we can say bag, board, there will be numerous objects we see around us. So anything that has state and behavior is known as an object. An object can be defined as an instance of a class. Okay, so object will be an instance of a class. An object contains an address and takes up some space in memory. Okay, so what does object basically store? It stores the address. Okay, and to store the address it needs some memory in the it needs some space in the memory actually. Then objects can communicate without knowing the details of each other's data or code. So objects can communicate with each other. They don't need to know the each other's code. Okay, or any other details. The only necessary thing is the type of message accepted and the type of response returned by the object. Okay, so that they need to worry about the type of message the object is accepting and the type of message the object is returning after the execution. So let's read through what other things object consist of. We all know that object is anything which has state and behavior. So what is state basically? State state is nothing but it is represented by attributes of an object. Okay, and it also reflects the properties of an object. Then what is behavior? Behavior, it is represented by methods of an object. So how the object is going to behave, it is represented by its methods actually. It also reflects the response of an object with other objects. Then what is identity? How to identify an object? It gives a unique name to an object and enables one object to interact with other objects. So each object will be identified with a unique name given to that object, and that will enable one object to interact with other object using the name. Then object consists of, or in the context of object, we need to understand what method does. Basically, a method is a collection of statements that performs some specific task and return result to the caller. Okay, so we all know that in the method we are going to describe some task or write some task, and when we call the method, it is going to provide us the result of the task written in the method. A method can perform some specific task without returning anything. So sometimes we don't need to return anything out of the task, we just need to execute the task. So that also can be done as part of method. Methods allow us to reuse the code without retyping the code. Right, because we can call the method at any point of time, so we don't need to write the code again and again which is written in the method. So we can simply call the method with using the object. In Java, every method must be part of some class which is different from languages like C, C++, and Python. So in Java, it is must that the method should be written in inside the class. Methods are time savers and helps to reuse the code without retyping the code. Right? Methods are time savers. So now let's understand what is class basically. Class is nothing but collection of object. It's called class. Okay. A class can also be referred as a blueprint or prototype from which you can create an individual objects. So let's understand in general when you need to declare the class, what things you need to do. Okay. So modifiers. A class can be public or has default access. Along with public and default, inner classes can be private and protected. So while declaring the class, you need to declare first the access modifier to the class. So that's why modifiers. Then the class name. The second thing you need to do is you need to declare the class name. The name should begin with the initial letter. Um, or it is the convention. By convention, the class name should begin with the letter and it should be capital. Superclass. Okay. The name of the parent class, superclass, if any, preceded by the keyword extends, a class can only extend subclass one parent. Okay. So basically, if you are extending the class, so you need to write down the name. Um, After the class, you need to write down the name of the superclass which we want to extend. But before that, you need to write a keyword extends and then superclass name. If you are implementing any interface as part of this class, then you need to write down the list of comma separated interfaces implemented by the class preceded by the keyword implements, and then finally the body. So these superclass and interfaces are not mandatory. You can it is as per the need whether you want to extend any class or whether you want to implement any interface. And then finally the body of the class will be there. It will start from braces and end with braces only. Then there are four pillars of OOPS. Those are nothing but abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. So to start with first pillar of OOPS, that is nothing but abstraction. So what is abstraction? Abstraction is a process of hiding the implementation details and showing only functionality to the user. So as part of abstraction, we don't show the internal implementation of the methods or class to the user. We only show the functionality. So that's how abstraction will help to hide the implementation. Data abstraction may also be defined as the process of identifying only the required characteristics of an object, ignoring the relevant details. That's right. So to achieve abstraction, normally the methods or class can be declared as abstract, like abstract public void calculate area. So here, if you consider this example of calculate area, it is an abstract method which is not returning anything. So if you now whenever user wants to calculate the area of the square, rectangle, or triangle, he or she can directly use that calculate area method, and the method will help to return the area. So user don't need to worry about how this method is implemented. He just need to he or she might only be interested in getting the area for square or rectangle or triangle. So that's how the abstraction will come in picture, that it will hide the internal implementation for that method calculate area, because for square the calculating the area of the square, the formula will be different. For rectangle it will be different. For triangle it will be different. So that all will be done as part of this method, and this will return the calculated area. So user will be only interested in getting the area, right? So what are the ways to achieve the abstraction? So there are two ways to achieve abstraction in Java. One is abstract classes. You can achieve abstraction with the abstract classes. The abstraction could be achieved from abstract classes is starting from 0 to 100%. Okay. And the second way is to achieve abstraction is nothing but interfaces. So you can declare the interfaces to achieve the abstraction. The abstraction achieved with interfaces is 100% abstraction. Then the second pillar of the OOPS is encapsulation. So what is encapsulation? Encapsulation in Java is a mechanism of wrapping the data, that is the variables which are used to store the data, and code acting on the data, that is the methods which will have the code written inside it, together as a single unit. Okay, so encapsulation, the variables of a class will be hidden from other classes and can be accessed only through the methods of their current class. Therefore, it is also known as data hiding. So if you see the diagram, it's showing the capsule, which is basically consisting of different variables and different methods. It's like the normal medicine capsule wherein all the contents are hidden inside the that capsule. So user will not be directly able to see the contents inside the capsule. If you need to see the contents, you need to break the capsule. So similarly in the Java, if you need to access the variables or you need to see the data from the variables, you cannot directly see from outside the class. If you need to see it, you need to go through methods and you need to access the data variables from the methods itself. So that's how the encapsulation will work in Java. So how to achieve the encapsulation in Java? It can be achieved in a below way, wherein you can declare the variables of a class as private, and you can provide the getter setter methods for those public private variables as public. Like the getter setter should be public so that they can getter setter methods can be accessed from outside the class. So if you consider the below example of what I have done here in a encapsulate test class, there are two methods, private method sorry, there are two private variables, string std name, student name and student role, and the getter setter methods have been provided of public getter setter methods have been provided for this two instance variables, string and string student name and student role. So if you have to access the values of these variables from another class, let's say test encapsulation, so what you need to do, you need to call the set name get name method, as you need to assign the values. And if you want to retrieve the values, you need to call the get name and get role methods. So you need to basically deal through getter setter methods to get the values of this private student name and student role variables from the encapsulate test class. So that's how the encapsulation will work, that it will also block the direct access to the variables from the encapsulate test class. So let's also read through some of the advantages of the encapsulation. The first advantage will be data hiding. So encapsulation can be used for data hiding. The user will have no idea about the inner implementation of the class. It will not be visible to the user how the class is storing values in the variables. The user will only know that we are passing the values to a setter method and variables are getting initialized with that value. So user will only know that you are only passing the values, but it will not have any other details like how the values are being stored in the variables. So there will be no view of the inner implementation of the class to the user. So that's how you can hide the data, whatever you are storing, how you are storing, and how the storage is being implemented, that will be hidden from the user. Then increase the flexibility. We can make the variables of the class read only or write only depending on our requirement, right? So it's flexible that whether you want to make those variables read only or write only. If you wish to make the variables read only, then we have to omit the setter methods like set name, set role. So if you want user to only read the values whatever already there and not to assign new values, then you can simply remove the setter methods so that user won't be able to change the values for name and role, etc. from the earlier program. Okay. Or if you wish to make the variables as write only, so if you want that you can only write the data but cannot read it again, then you can simply omit the get uh, get setters, actually get name and get role methods from the program. Then the third advantage will be reusability. So encapsulation also improves the reusability and easy to change with new requirements, right? Then testing code is easy. Encapsulated code is easy to test for unit testing. Okay. So let's understand the difference between abstraction and encapsulation, because sometimes abstraction and encapsulation confuses due to this feature of data hiding in both of us in a different way. So let's start. So abstraction shows only useful data by providing the most necessary details. So abstraction will also hide the unnecessary details, whereas encapsulation wraps code and data for necessary information. So encapsulation will do also, it will also bind the data together for necessary information. Abstraction is focused mainly on what should be done, like, right? So abstraction is focused mainly on what should be done, whereas encapsulation is focused on how it should be done, right? So there is difference. Abstraction will deal with what should be done, and encapsulation should deal with how it should be done. Then abstraction hides complexity by giving you a more abstract picture. Then encapsulation hides internal working so that you can change it later. The fourth one, abstraction helps you to partition the program into many independent portions. Then encapsulation is easy to change with new requirements. Abstraction solves problem at design level. Okay, so if there are any problems, it can be solved at design level using the abstraction, whereas encapsulation solves problem at implementation level. So for encapsulation, if there is a problem, it will be solved in implementation level itself. Abstraction hides the relevant details found in the code, whereas encapsulation helps developer to organize the entire code easily. So these are some of the differences in between abstraction and encapsulation. So let's understand some things about third pillar of the OOPS, that is inheritance. So inheritance, it is the mechanism in Java by which one class is allowed to inherit the features, fields, and in features means fields and in methods of another class. Okay, a class that is derived from another class is called a subclass. Okay, so a class that is derived from another class is called a subclass. Subclass is also known as with some different name like derived class, extended class, or a child class. And on the other hand, the class from which the subclass is derived is called a superclass. Okay, and superclass also will be referred as base class or parent class. So in Java, except object is one of the predefined top level class in Java. So in Java, except object, which has no superclass, as I said, it's a top level class, so it will not be having any other superclass about to it. Every class has one and only one direct superclass. So it is important. Every class has one and only one direct superclass, that is single inheritance, in the absence of any other explicit superclass. In case if you have not written any superclass to your manually let's say created class, then that class is implicitly a subclass of a object. So this is important. So even if you are not writing even if you are not extending your class with any other class in Java, implicitly it means that it has been extended by the object class. So if you take an example, this class test, if you have written a class test simply, so that means in Java it will be referred to as class test extends the object, because object is a top level class for all the um, uh, predefined classes or not predefined classes in the Java. So let's understand the Java platform class hierarchy here. The object class defined in the Java Lang package defines and implements behavior common to all classes, including the ones that you write. So as I said, it is a parent class. This object class is a parent class of all the predefined classes in Java, and it also includes the ones that we are going to write as in a Java code. In the Java platform, many classes derive directly from object, other classes derive from some of those classes, and so on. So there will be hierarchy, like object will be at top level, Then some classes will be derived with the from that object class. Then other classes will be derived from the child of the object class, and this hierarchy will go on. And this kind of as shown in the diagram, this kind of hierarchy will be formed. So at the top of the hierarchy, object is the most general of all classes, right? And classes near the bottom of the hierarchy provide more specialized behavior. So as we go down and down, the classes will be extended to depict the more specialized behavior. All classes in the Java platform are descendants of object class. So if anyone asks you who is the topmost parent class, it is the object class, and all the classes below to the object class are descendants of the object class. Now let's understand what can be done in a subclass. A subclass basically inherits all of the public and protected members of its parents, no matter what package the subclass is in. Okay. If the subclass is in the same package as its parent, then it also inherits the package private members of the parent. Okay. You can use the inherited members as is if you want to, or you can replace them, you can hide them, or supplement them with new members. So this all things can be done in a subclass. The inherited fields can be used directly, just like any other fields. So if you are inheriting, that means you can use the parent fields just like it is there in a subclass itself. You can declare a field in the subclass with the same name as the one in the superclass. So you can declare a field in subclass as well, but it will then hide the field from the parent class. So which is not recommended, because here the parent field is altogether accessible to the subclass. So I don't see a point to write it again in a subclass. You can declare new fields in the subclass that are not in the superclass. So here we can say, like, if there is a need and if something is not there in superclass, you can newly write it down in subclass itself. The inherited methods can be used directly as they are. Right, inherited methods can be used directly. You can write a new instance method in the subclass that has the same signature as the one in the superclass, thus overriding it. So in case if you want to change the implementation of any method from parent class, you can write it down with the same signature and you can change the implementation. So it will become an overriding of that method actually. You can write a new static method in the subclass that has the same signature as the one in the superclass, thus hiding it. So if you are writing the same static method, so you are just hiding it, because static method, if you are writing with the same signature, it can't be said as it's overridden. It will be hiding actually. You can declare new methods in the subclass that are not in the superclass. So it's obvious that you can declare as many as methods you want, not necessarily whether that should be there in subclass or not. You can write a subclass constructor that invokes the constructor of the superclass either implicitly or by using the keyword super. So this we have already understood how this super keyword invokes the constructor of superclass. So what are the types of inheritance in Java? There are various forms of representing a parent-child relationship in object-oriented programming. And Java supports three types of inheritance on the basis of parent class and child class relationships. Okay, so this single inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and hierarchical inheritance. These are the three types of inheritance supported in Java. So that's set for inheritance. We will learn more about what is single inheritance, multi-level inheritance, and hierarchical inheritance in another video. So let's start with our fourth pillar, that is polymorphism. Polymorphism in Java is the ability of an object to take many forms. So if we split the word polymorphism itself, poly means many and morphism means forms. So the many forms, that's how the word polymorphism itself can be split. In short, polymorphism in Java allows us to perform the same action in many different ways. Right. So if you want to do a single action in a different way, it could be done, or it will be said as polymorphism achieved in Java for that action. Any Java object that can pass more than one either test is considered to be polymorphic, and in Java all the Java objects are polymorphic as it has passed the either test for their own type and for the class object, right? Okay, so if you consider the example of this cut action, so whenever this cut is heard by surgeon, the surgeon would begin to make an incision, right? Because the cut the meaning of cut for surgeon will be to make a incision. The same word or the same action heard by hairstylist, the hairstylist would begin to cut someone's hair, right? Because that makes more context to him, that what does cut means to hairstylist. Similarly, when the doctor hears the cut word or cut action, the sorry, the actor, not the doctor, the actor would abruptly stop acting out the current scene, awaiting dictatorial guidance. So for actor, the cut means stop acting. Then types of polymorphism, or the ways to achieve the polymorphism in Java. So basically, there are two ways or two types of polymorphism achieved in Java. One is either it can be said static polymorphism, or it sometimes said as compile time polymorphism or early binding. And the examples of this examples to achieve this kind of static or compile time polymorphism is nothing but method overloading, constructor overloading, and the method hiding. So that will be a part of, or that those will be the examples for static polymorphism. So when we say the second type is dynamic polymorphism or runtime polymorphism or late binding, and the example would be method overriding. So we'll learn more about these types of polymorphism in a detail in our next video. Okay. So that's it for today's tutorial, guys. If you have any queries, concern, drop me an email, or you can put in the comment section. I know this is theoretical session, so we'll learn more about inheritance and polymorphism with some code examples in our later video.